In his 20 years of studying the minds of history's most accomplished individuals, Napoleon Hill uncovered a truth that most of us never see until it's too late. And in this video, we're going to explore that truth. What actually happens when you don't feel like moving, and how to break through when everything in you wants to stay still.
Most people wait until they feel like it, and that single mistake is the reason they never become who they were meant to be. Let's begin with something that sounds too simple to be important, but I promise you, it is the foundation of everything we are about to explore. Most people believe that action follows feeling. It seems obvious, does it not? If you feel inspired, you act. If you feel energized, you work. If you feel confident, you speak. And if you do not feel like doing something, you wait until the feeling arrives. We have been taught, indirectly, that our feelings are the green lights of life. Red light, stop. Green light, go. And so we spend our days checking the internal weather. Am I motivated today? Do I feel passionate about this? Is my heart in it? And when the answer is no which, it often is, we sit still, we scroll, we wait. We convince ourselves that we are being wise, that we are not forcing things, that we are respecting our own rhythm. But here is the hidden problem. The feeling you are waiting for, it never comes first. Napoleon Hill, in his years of studying the most successful and self-determined individuals of his era, discovered a pattern that most people overlook. He found that the people who achieved extraordinary things were not the people who felt like working every day. They were the people who understood that feeling is not a cause, it is a result. Let me say that again. Feeling is not a cause, it is a result. When you sit and wait to feel motivated, you are waiting for a result that can only be produced by action. You are waiting for the fire to start before you strike the match. And so you sit in the cold, wondering why warmth never comes. This is the hidden problem. It is invisible because it feels reasonable. It feels like self-care. It feels like being honest about your energy. But what it actually is a subtle form of waiting for permission. And the person you are waiting to give you that permission is yourself. But you are waiting for a version of yourself that does not exist yet, the version that is already in motion. Most people ignore this problem because it is too simple to take seriously. They think their issue is a lack of clarity, or a lack of skill, or a lack of opportunity. But if you look closely, the real issue is often just this. They have trained themselves to only move when they feel like it. And because life is long and moods are fleeting, they spend most of their lives standing still. And standing still, when you have a destination in mind, is not rest. It is the slow erosion of trust in yourself. Think about it. Every time you tell yourself you will do something, and then you wait for a feeling that never comes, you are teaching yourself that your own word cannot be trusted. And a person who does not trust themselves will never be able to persist long enough to build anything meaningful. So the hidden problem is not laziness, it is not a lack of ambition. It is a misunderstanding of the relationship between feeling and doing, and until that misunderstanding is corrected, momentum will always feel like something that happens to other people. Now, let's look at what happens inside the mind when that whisper comes. Because understanding the trap is the first step to stepping out of it. There is a mental habit that keeps people average, and it is so common that we hardly notice it. It is the habit of treating our moods as if they are instructions. When you wake up and feel heavy, your mind says, "I am heavy, therefore I should not move." When you feel uncertain, your mind says, "I am uncertain, therefore I should not decide." When you feel uninspired, your mind says, "I am uninspired, therefore I should not create." This is the trap. It is the belief that your current emotional state is a valid reason to delay your intended action. But here is what Napoleon Hill understood that most people do not. The human mind is not a single voice. It is a collection of voices. And the voice that tells you to wait, to rest, to do it tomorrow, that voice is not your wisdom. That voice is your resistance, and it speaks loudest when you are closest to something important. Think of a river. A river does not flow because it feels like flowing. It flows because gravity pulls it. Gravity does not consult the river's mood. It simply acts. Now, consider your life. What if you had a gravity? What if you had something within you that did not ask how you felt, but simply moved you forward because the direction was already set? The mental trap that keeps people average is the illusion that they are at the mercy of their feelings. And because they believe this, they build their lives around managing their feelings instead of moving toward their purpose. They wake up and ask, "What do I feel like doing today?" instead of asking, "What must I do today to honor the person I am becoming?" And over time, this small shift in the question creates a massive difference in the outcome. The average person waits for the perfect emotional conditions. The person who builds something real understands that perfect emotional conditions are a myth. They understand that the only conditions that matter are the ones they create through action. But here is why this trap is so hard to escape. It feels protective. When you decide not to act because you don't feel like it, you feel a momentary relief. You feel like you avoided a struggle. You feel like you were kind to yourself. But that relief is the trap closing, because every time you avoid action to preserve comfort, you strengthen the part of you that believes comfort is the goal. And comfort is not the goal. Growth is the goal. Contribution is the goal. Becoming the person who can handle difficulty, that is the goal. So the trap is this. You are designed for more than comfort, but you have trained yourself to treat comfort as the highest good. And now, whenever you face something that requires effort, your mind signals danger. Not because there is danger, but because effort feels uncomfortable. And you have taught yourself that discomfort is something to escape, not something to move through. And that is how people stay average. Not because they lack talent, not because they lack dreams, but because they have built a life around avoiding the very discomfort that growth requires. Now we arrive at something that, if you truly hear it, can change the way you move through the world. Napoleon Hill spent over 20 years studying the minds of individuals who had achieved what most people only dream of. And in all that research, he identified a principle that he placed at the very center of his philosophy. He called it definiteness of purpose. But most people misunderstand what this means. They think it simply means having a goal. Write down what you want, be specific, and while that is part of it, it misses the deeper truth. Definiteness of purpose is not just knowing what you want. It is deciding that what you want is more important than how you feel in any given moment. Let that land. It is a decision so clear, so absolute, that it becomes the gravity we spoke of earlier. It becomes the force that moves you when your feelings are pulling you in the opposite direction. It is not a wish written on paper. It is a commitment etched into the way you live. Hill discovered that the individuals who achieved lasting success did not rely on motivation. They relied on a decision that was made once and then never revisited. They did not wake up every morning asking if they still felt like pursuing their purpose. They had already decided. And because the decision was made, their feelings became secondary. Now, this is not about ignoring your emotions or pretending you are not tired. It is about understanding that your emotions are passengers in the vehicle of your life, not the driver. And when you let the passengers decide the direction, you will spend your life going in circles. Here is the principle in its simplest form. You will never consistently act until you decide that your purpose is more important than your comfort. And this decision cannot be made halfway. It is not. I'll try to do this even when it's hard. That is not a decision. That is a hope. A decision is a line drawn in the sand. It is a moment where you say, regardless of how I feel between now and then, I will do what I said I would do. This is what Hill meant by definiteness. Not vague intention, not casual interest, but a purpose that is so clearly defined that it becomes a filter through which all other decisions are made. When you have this, something remarkable happens. The whisper that once stopped you, the one that said, "I don't feel like it," loses its power. Not because you become immune to fatigue or doubt, but because you have something stronger to listen to. You see, the mind can only serve one master. If your master is your mood, you will be unstable. You will be productive one day and paralyzed the next. But if your master is a definite purpose, your moods become weather passing through a landscape that remains unchanged. The rain comes, the wind blows, but the ground beneath you does not move. This is the principle that changes everything. Not a trick, not a hack, not a morning routine, but a decision so clear and so permanent that it outlasts your feelings. And the moment you make that decision, you stop waiting to feel like it. Because you realize that waiting to feel like it is just a way of letting your feelings vote on your future. And you have already decided that your feelings do not get a vote. If you look closely at people who build something that lasts, whether it is a business, a body of work, a skill, or a life of deep integrity, you will notice that they think about action in a way that is almost the opposite of how most people think. Most people believe that motivation leads to action, which leads to results. But great achievers operate on a different formula. They understand that action leads to motivation, which leads to more action. This is not a subtle difference. It is a complete reversal. When you wait to feel motivated before you act, you're asking for the result before you do the work. It is like standing at the bottom of a hill and waiting to feel strong before you begin the climb. The strength does not come from waiting. It comes from the first step, and then the next, and then the next. Each step builds the very strength you are waiting for. This is what great achievers know. They know that action creates its own energy. Think of a heavy flywheel. The first few turns are exhausting. They require effort that feels disproportionate to the result. Your muscles ache. Your mind questions why you are even trying. But once the flywheel begins to gain momentum, it starts to help itself. Each turn becomes easier than the last. What once required all your effort now moves with a life of its own. This is how great achievers think. They do not wait for momentum to appear. They create it through the simple, unglamorous act of beginning. And they understand that the beginning is always the hardest part, because the beginning requires the most effort and yields the least visible reward. But they also understand something else. They understand that persistence is not a personality trait that you either have or you do not. It is a system. It is a way of relating to difficulty. Napoleon Hill observed that the most successful individuals did not have more willpower than everyone else. They had a different relationship with failure and resistance. They did not interpret the feeling of difficulty as a sign to stop. They interpreted it as a sign that they were moving in the right direction. This is a profound shift. When you believe that difficulty means you are on the wrong path, you will quit every time things get hard. But when you understand that difficulty is simply the nature of growth, you stop being surprised by it. You stop asking, why is this so hard? And start asking, what is this difficulty teaching me? Great achievers think differently because they have redefined success. Success to them is not the absence of resistance. Success is the ability to continue in spite of resistance. And this changes how they approach those moments when they don't feel like it. They do not ask, do I feel like doing this? They ask, what is the next small action I can take to keep the flywheel turning? They have learned that momentum is fragile, and they protect it fiercely. They know that stopping when you don't feel like it is not a neutral act. It is a step backward, because every time you stop, you have to overcome not only the original resistance, but also the added resistance of having broken your word to yourself. So they think in terms of motion, not perfection, not inspiration, just motion. One small step, then another. They know that a life of meaning is not built in a single heroic moment. It is built in thousands of small moments where they chose to move when nothing inside them wanted to move. And over time, that simple shift motion over mood compounds into a life that looks effortless from the outside, but was built on a foundation of choices made when no one was watching. And now we arrive at the quiet truth that changes everything. If you've been listening closely, you may have already felt it, the subtle shift that happens when you realize that you have been waiting for something that was never going to come on its own. A kind of stillness settles in, not the stillness of giving up, but the stillness of finally understanding. The awakening is this: you do not need to feel like it. That is the whole secret, the entire thing, stripped of all complexity. You do not need to feel like it. You do not need to be inspired. You do not need to be confident. You do not need to be confident. You do not need to be certain. You only need to move. For years, perhaps, you have been standing at the edge of something important, waiting for a green light that only you could give yourself. And the waiting felt like wisdom. It felt like patience. But it was neither. It was simply the habit of treating your feelings as if they were the final authority. And now, in this moment, you see it clearly. The authority was never in the feeling. The authority is in you, in the part of you that can watch a feeling arise and still choose what comes next. Here is the beautiful part. When you move, when you don't feel like it, you are not just getting the thing done. You are building something far more valuable. You are building trust with yourself. You are proving to yourself, not with words, but with action, that you are the kind of person who does what they say they will do, regardless of the weather inside. And that trust, once it is built, becomes unshakable. It becomes the foundation upon which everything else is built. Most people spend their lives searching for the perfect system, the perfect routine, the perfect mindset. But the person who awakens to this truth understands that the system is secondary. The mindset is secondary. What matters is the decision to move, and then the next decision to move again. Napoleon Hill wrote about a quality he called decision. He placed it among the 13 principles of success. But he did not mean decision as in choosing a career. He meant decision as in the ability to make up your mind and then hold to that decision until it becomes reality. And that is what we are really talking about tonight. Not a one-time choice, but 1,000 small choices made in the quiet moments when no one is watching. It is not about forcing yourself into exhaustion. It is not about ignoring your limits. It is about recognizing the difference between a legitimate need for rest and a resistance that is trying to protect you from discomfort. One is wisdom, the other is a cage. The quiet awakening is the moment you realize that the feeling of not wanting to do something is not a command. It is just a feeling. And you are not your feelings. You are the one who watches your feelings, and you are the one who decides what to do next. So tonight, if there is something you have been waiting to feel like doing, let this be the moment you release that expectation. You do not need to wait. You do not need to feel ready. You only need to take one small step, and then another, and then another. And slowly, quietly, momentum will find you. Not because you chased it, but because you stopped waiting for it. You created it, with your own hands, in the moments when you didn't feel like it. That is how things are built. That is how people change. That is how a life of meaning is formed. Not in grand moments of inspiration, but in the quiet, uncelebrated moments of choosing to move, when everything in you wants to be still. And now you know something most people never realize. You know that the whisper does not have to stop you. You can hear it, acknowledge it, and move anyway. Not because you are forcing yourself, but because you have finally understood that you are stronger than your feelings. And that understanding, once it takes root, changes everything. So tonight, let the only permission you need be the one you give yourself. And remember, momentum doesn't come to those who wait, it answers those who begin.